All right, so let's get into the Harbaugh-Stafford thing. I mean, Mike, look, I think you can make a case both ways here. Now, again, my one ground rule, you are not allowed to come in and trash either guy. That's not fair. They're both good at what they do. Stafford's a good quarterback. Harbaugh's a good coach. This is an issue of nationally, Stafford is discussed as being elite or borderline elite. At times, we've thought he is elite. Certainly late game, he is viewed as a hero, and oftentimes he is. Harbaugh, people like Joel Klatt have gone out and said he's the single best football coach in America. Number of people believe he walks on water. But there are major holes in each guy's resume. No playoff wins for Stafford, no division titles for Stafford, and a record against winning teams that we have to be honest about, even though it's not all his fault. 5-50 is way out of whack. Just can't imagine Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers or Brady or pick a guy that you view as being really good being in that spot. I mean, Eli Manning's been on a lot of bad Giant teams. Let's face it, right? Eli is not my favorite person. But Eli doesn't have a record like that against good teams. And Eli, let's see, 14 years in the league, 12 of those years hasn't won a playoff game. Hasn't made the playoffs, I think, in 8 of those 12. So he's been on some bad teams now. I guarantee Eli's better than 5-50 against teams with a winning record. So we have to view that and go, okay, wait, now this is getting out of whack. You go with Harbaugh, whether it's Stanford or at Michigan, hasn't won a conference, does not have a good record against rivals. The coverage and the hype, the sizzle is not equaled by stake. And he's headed into year 4. We still don't know who the quarterback is. We don't know if he has one. I understand some people's frustration there, too. Still a good coach, no doubt about it. But when you start to look at, I mean, Harbaugh against top 10 teams, 0-6. 1-5 against his primary rivals. It is what it is. You know, Bill Parcells' old saying, your record is, you are what your record is. And while Harbaugh's record is 28-10, which is classy in 3 years, it's good. It's far from elite. It's far from what you as Michigan fans were promised. And it's empty. Because if we wrote down the list of teams he's beaten in his career there and separated home and away, I mean, this is a season where Harbaugh didn't beat a team with a winning record. That's facts, guys. That's just true. So which of these guys is more overrated? Here's why I think Harbaugh's probably more overrated. It's because at no point has Matthew Stafford been called the best quarterback in football. But in many cases, I've heard people say that Harbaugh is indeed the best coach in college football. Now, I think that's waning. The difference is Harbaugh on his worst day is still viewed better than maybe Stafford on his best day. For instance, Stafford at no point has been viewed as a top 3 or 4 QB. Harbaugh's always viewed as a top 3 or 4 coach, especially by national media hacks. With Stafford, the bottom is lower. I mean, Thanksgiving Day was depressing. He played a poor football game. Okay, you can fill in the blank with whatever adjective you like. Stafford played a very poor game. Stafford and Harbaugh have one thing that really is in common. Neither seems to show up in a big spot. Stafford with the, again, it's not entirely his fault, but 5-50 against teams with winning records, it's getting out of control because, look, Lions have made the playoffs now, 3 times? 2 of the last 3 years. They're not a disgrace this year, but they're also not awesome. His record continues to get worse against good teams. Last year, playoff team, needed to just get one of the final 3. Didn't. Injured or not. Playoff game, didn't score a TD. His record keeps getting worse. Harbaugh, big spot. I don't need to hit the dial tone. We've covered it. That is a parallel you could draw between these two. But which is more overrated? 248-539-9797. And again, You're not allowed to call them frauds. You're not allowed to say they're terrible. It's not true. They're both good. It's which one is a bigger, which guy is perceived incorrectly, falsely. Sully, your view.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it, though, too. When we say overrated, we're not overrated doesn't mean you suck. Overrated means who's the more overhyped, overvalued type guy. And when I look at this, I mean, my head hurts just thinking about this question. My head hurts trying to come up with an answer to this. But I think with Stafford, at least he's putting up numbers. He's producing, I'd say. I don't get the vibe so far that Harbaugh is producing at Michigan. I think he's been a big disappointment so far. He's 0-6 against underdogs, 1-5 against rivals. We all know the numbers. I would have to say that Harbaugh is more overrated because at the end of the day, I'm not, apologizing for Stafford here, but at the end of the day, Stafford's still putting up stats. He's putting up numbers. He's bailed the Lions out plenty of times. And if you take Stafford off the Lions, I think that team looks a lot different than if you take Harbaugh off Michigan. If you take Harbaugh off of Michigan, I mean, we've basically had the same record as Brady Hoke for a while.
I go easy with the Hoke thing.
I just think that
I think as long as Michigan
difference.
had hired a quality coach, all right? Brady Hoke was not a quality coach. But as long as Michigan had hired a quality coach, pretty sure you get the same thing the last 3 years. I don't think Harbaugh has done anything miraculous here. People want to say, oh, well, look what he did in year one. I mean, those are all NFL players, guys. That was a team that wasn't playing for Brady Hoke anymore. There were critical failings on that staff. Everybody viewed him as a joke. A new coach comes in, gets kids to buy in, cracks the whip. Urban did that at every stop, did it at Bowling Green when he had kids puking in buckets and took a 3-win team to like 10 games. Harbaugh's a good coach, but lots of good coaches come in and have a good first year. He made Rudock. Dude, Rudock threw for like 6,000 yards at Iowa. It's not like he was terrible. Year two, all right, you had a nice year and then fell apart and lost 3 of your last 4 games. Didn't show up in big spots. Michigan's schedule was very light in the pants. You come back year 3, and yeah, okay, a step back would be acceptable, except one problem. You didn't beat anybody who was decent on your schedule at all. You played 4 good teams. You went 0-4. To me, it's like they could have hired a lot of guys to do what he did the first 3 years. Where Harbaugh is going to earn his keep, what do you do in year 4, 5, and 6? Because, look, the longer he goes without winning anything, the more he's got to win. Like, if he walked in the first 3 years and had just won the Big Ten once, and got aced in the playoff, I think everybody would be dancing for joy, and rightfully so. I think that'd be a really, really good debut. The problem is you haven't even been close. You could say what you want about, the spot in Columbus. Dude, you threw 2 terrible interceptions and a pick 6 that Harbaugh himself blames himself for allowing Spate to throw it out of the end zone. So nobody wants to hear that. You finished 3rd in the East, 4th in the East. Now, Stafford, that is interesting what Sully says. Stafford brings you back for miracle W's. A lot of QBs aren't capable of that. The problem is, when you need him most in big games, where is he? Where is he?
He disappears. But I would also say that Harbaugh has had talent and hasn't done anything with it, and the opposite for Stafford.
Can't say anything. I think you should say hasn't done enough in big spots.
Well, he hasn't.
Carefully choose your words.
But with Stafford hasn't had talent. He's never had a run game. He's never really had good coaches. And he does stuff with it. He brings the Lions back single-handedly. Yep. I think it's a very interesting question, but I'd have to say that Harbaugh's probably more overrated.
I'm glad you think it's interesting.